everybody, Eric here. Wanted to talk to you a little bit today about coffee grinders. Now we all know that it's always best to keep your coffee beans whole bean right up until you actually brew your coffee. That way it stays fresh and most flavorful. And if you're going to get a grinder, there are basically two different types of grinders that you can get. The first type of grinder that you can get, you've probably seen this one, you may even have one at home like this, but this is called a blade grinder. And the reason it's called a blade grinder is because inside the grinder is a little blade, and when I put the top on or do something along this line and press the button, the blade spins around and grinds my coffee. It's really easy to use. All you do is measure out your coffee that you're going to put in there. Put the top on. Hold the blade down hold the button down for a few minutes, and it'll grind your coffee just like that. It's really easy to do, and these are really inexpensive. There's a couple of disadvantages to this particular type of grinder. Number one is if you look into this, into the ground coffee, you'll see that there's a lot of uneven, there's some that are really fine, and then there's some big chunks in there as well. So you're not going to get an even extraction on that. That's not such a big deal if you're doing a French press or something like that, but if you're doing a pour over, you run the risk of getting things too fine and your pour over running too slow and you're getting really strong and bitter coffee. It's kind of difficult to get everything exactly right if you're doing this. The other option that we've got is called a Burr grinder. And the reason it's called a Burr grinder, I'm going to take this one off. This is my Barazza Virtuoso, which I've had for a long time. It's a fantastic grinder. But instead of having a blade going around, you'll see this one is a conical burr grinder. It's got two different burrs that basically turn around and crush the beans as opposed to the blade that spins around and chops them. So we've got a much more even grind, and it's much more uniform across the whole grind. So that's what the difference is between a burr grinder and a blade grinder. Now this particular burr grinder is nice as well because in addition to having the burrs that are even, on this grinder I can make an adjustment back and forth to adjust how fine or how coarse I want my coffee to be ground. So if I'm doing a French press, for example, I might set this all the way over to 30 or even beyond to get a very coarse grind. Whereas if I'm grinding for something like an espresso even possibly, I might crank this all the way down to 5 or 10, okay? So the way it works is it's got a hopper up the top, and you just put the beans in. I usually leave the hopper full. Sometimes we measure out and just put enough in the hopper for what we're brewing at that particular time. I've got a timer on the side here that I can use, or there's a button on the front that'll grind the coffee as long as I hold the button, so I can kind of pulse it like that. You can hear it going, and the burrs spin a lot slower than the blade spins on the blade grinder. So what that does is that keeps things from heating up in there as well. And the end result, when you're done grinding your coffee, you'll see, is a much more even grind of coffee than what you had before. So that's the difference that's on here. You've got your blade grinders, which are great for grinding your coffee. They're inexpensive. They're really easy to use. You probably already have one. The downside is that they're not as accurate in grinding for different brewing techniques. And you've got your Burr grinder, which is highly recommended. It's a little more expensive, but it's definitely going to give you a better grind of your coffee.